I'm Andrew Hagan. I do not represent the post office. I don't represent the NLC. I'm here just purely on my own opinion, viewpoints, my experience with the Postal Service. But yeah, do not represent the post office or the NLC.
What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? So we're gonna be talking about unions.
That's right.
Again.
We just can't stay away. Naturally, it's a huge progressive proponent. Kind of labor. I mean, just like labor in general. Not everybody is part of the progressive movement who's in a union, and certainly.
Obviously we're not in unions. We talk about unions probably more than most people in the union, and we're not in a union.
Possible.
But
that's possible.
I would like a union for what I do here, but
TikToker union.
Yeah, TikToker union would be fucking awesome.
I think
just
that's
a creators union. I've been
Creators
pitching it for a
union,
while.
Yeah.
It's just a tough one to try to organize. But
Yeah, big
organizing.
tech, it's gonna be a tough one to go against.
Organizing in general is hard, but
True.
yeah, then something as organized as cats already would be pretty hard. But anyway, we've got Andrew Hagan with us today. He is a friend and sort of family member. My wife's
Alabama
brother-in-law's brother. So, but he's been working for the post office for how long now?
Going on 4 years.
4 years now,
Nice.
and has really gotten involved in the union. So we'll just start asking you a few questions here. What made you decide to just jump into to getting a job with the post office to begin with? Because post office is obviously one of those quintessential union jobs. And they've been struggling to recruit people. Obviously, it's been difficult for a while. So what brought you in? What got you doing that to begin with?
So my previous employment before the post office, I was a casino dealer. Did 2 years total in Vegas, and then I had 3 or so years here in Minnesota and Northwood, Iowa. And so pandemic happened, just like the rest of the world. Vegas shut down. We weren't isolated to that.
Right.
And you really liked doing the blackjack dealing and stuff, didn't you? Like
Blackjack out there,
Or,
I primarily did craps.
crap, whatever. You liked the
dice.
dealing though,
Yeah.
being a dealer and,
Yeah.
and working in the casino.
Loved it.
Because I remember you were like itching to go back, and then
Still am. not necessarily in the dealer perspective, mindset. I could transfer with the post office out to Vegas. That is one of the nice things. Also, on a side note, working for a post office, I can go to any
There's
state
branches everywhere.
and territory.
every town has one.
Yes, they do. But yeah, I got laid off at a young age. I think I was 23 when that happened. Not wanting to experience that again, I started to look for more secure jobs, and post office was one of them.
Sure.
And obviously they were hiring immediately. There was like a 3-4 month gap between my employment of leaving dealing, moving back home. So I needed something quick to get involved, and so post office was it.
Oh, all right. So then obviously, like, to be in the post office, you have to join the union, right? That's a non-negotiable, or
We are an open shop.
really?
So, which kind of speaks to our. So we're an open shop, right? But we are 95+% organized.
Wow.
So even it's not a
With one
requirement, but
union?
people believe in our union, NALC.
With the single union or multiple unions throughout the country?
So within the post office, I believe there's 3-4 unions.
Okay.
I'm not educated on that
Sure.
100%,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I
that's
do.
fine.
There are multiple, but the ones that represent the NAL or the carriers is the NALC, National Association of Letter Carriers.
Okay.
And so we have about 210,000 active carriers. And then, like I said, about 95% of us are organized.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's a number I don't think you're gonna match
No.
anywhere, especially in a non-mandatory sense.
right?
yeah.
Like that's incredible.
That is amazing. So so it's not. I was always under the impression that it was required. I mean, obviously, like, post office is quintessential union job. So when you think union post office, I've always just assumed that, like, you get your union card when you walk through the door, no matter what.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's really easy to just be a dues-paying member and not do anything. But you're doing stuff. You are actually getting a little more hands-on.
Trying to.
And so, I guess, could you explain to us what you're doing and how you got roped into doing it, or what kind of motivated you to get to that point?
Yeah. So we'll start at February of 2021. That's when I started being a mail carrier. Abusive management. That's the easiest way to get a union involved and to be part of a union, right? So yeah, I was dealing with abusive management at the time. I started going to meetings, expressing my concerns as a part-time carrier, CCA at the time, city carrier assistant. Started learning the ropes of, my background. I grew up in a household, the teacher union. My dad's been a part of it for 36 years.
Nice.
So I came into the job already having a labor mindset. Unions, but obviously each union is different. So now to speed back up to me going to the meetings. Started advocating for that, learning the roles that are open. Trying to partake in that. Became the alternate steward at my first station. Transferred to another station. I'm the head steward there now. Again, trying to advocate for carriers, trying to educate them on our contract, on our rights. And then I'm also the letter carrier political fund coordinator for our specific branch.
So for all of us, normies that are not in a union or haven't been in a union, what is first of all, what's a union head steward or head union steward? What is that?
So the union head steward is basically we're the ones that file the grievance for the carriers. And so when I'm in my station workroom floor, when management yells at a carrier or tries to pull them in for discipline or makes some kind of blanket policy, I'm usually the one that steps in and says, no, you can't do that. Here's the contract. Here's the manuals. This is going to be a grievance if you want to follow through on this. Or if a carrier happens to get into some discipline, I make sure it's fair and equitable. If it'd seem
so you're sort of like the union rep for these guys then in a way?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah. Union rep, I guess, is the same as union steward.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Gotcha. How often does your role come into play? Is it every day?
Every day. There's something, whether it's good or bad.
Right. No, yeah.
Sometimes at my particular station now, every morning I always educate my carriers on something. Like scanners right now are a big hot topic. We've updated our system. Management can track us down to the foot.
Wow.
And if we stay stationary for like 30 seconds, an alarm goes off.
So like Amazon level tracking, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And instead of doing their due diligence and following their manuals, it's laid out, black and white. Here's the progression of discipline and how you can do it. Instead, they usually go to, you're stealing company time. We're going to put you on a 7-day suspension. Well, you can't use data to do that. You got to go out and see it with your eyes, so stuff like that. Yesterday, I was happy to educate my carriers on Sunday, the 28th was Workers' Memorial Day.
Right.
So that's part of my duties too, to educate, the labor workforce. Today is International Workers' Day. Sure. So, our union had a Facebook post on that, and I shared it with my carriers. It's awesome. The hat that I wear is wide, so.
Yeah, it sounds like it's an interesting role because you're probably not the most senior person at your station.
Oh, God, no.
So, being 4 years in and having such a hands-on, involvement with everybody's potentially career, their job, that's really, I don't see that in a normal private business workplace.
No.
That's
which I think is a good thing to point out because I think the idea of joining a union and getting involved in a union, really anything organized at all, but specifically a union, is a daunting task, and I think a lot of people feel like even if they did get involved, they wouldn't have a voice, they wouldn't have the ability to make a difference. You hear a lot of people who are a little disgruntled with their unions, feeling like they're not being properly represented, and so they can bitch about it, which is what, we all hear on our end of it, or they can do what you did, and you don't have to be senior. You don't have to work your way up to these things necessarily. You can just jump in and be like, hey, I want my voice to be louder, and there's spaces to fill regardless of your seniority. So that's awesome.
Yeah. I happen to represent the most senior carrier in Minneapolis. Started carrying mail in 1978.
Wow.
So as a newer carrier, and steward, I take honor in representing that particular carrier and anyone between him and me, and who's below me even,
Awesome. That's awesome.
Absolutely. So,
And then,
yeah.
the political fund coordinator, I'm assuming. So the whole reason you ended up here is we were at the same event together. We didn't even see each other at the event. We were at the Mondale Humphrey dinner, a big DFL. For those of you who aren't in Minnesota, it's the Minnesota Democratic Party, Democratic Farmer Labor. Their big fundraiser dinner. It's usually a either an invite only, or you got to spend pretty big money per plate to get there. So it's people who are looking for access to the kind of upper echelon of Minnesota politics. And I got invited because I talk a lot of shit on the internet. And
somehow, man. Upper echelon of Minnesota politics. Here we are.
And I didn't even realize. So like I get invited because the vice chair of the DFL is a fan of the TikTok page, and she's just been really awesome trying to, I think, goad me into being more involved in DFL politics, which I'm begrudgingly admitting she's being somewhat successful about, because now suddenly I'm a delegate or something. I don't even know what I am, but I'm signed up for something. And so like I didn't quite realize, because I've been to fundraiser dinners before for nonprofit. I used to work for the Boy Scouts and stuff like that. And I just sort of assumed it was like that. So when I saw a picture of you on Facebook with Senator Warnock, and I was like, "Oh, cool! You were there. We were there. How did I miss you? Because if you're doing this audio only and not on the YouTubes, Andrew's not a small person. How tall are you?
I'm 6'5".
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's hard to miss, and somehow I managed to. It's probably because I'm too short.
You just couldn't see over everybody's normal height.
That's probably what it was. So we missed each other, and so I commented. I was like, "Oh, funny story that we were there and you missed." And you're like, "Oh, what were you doing there? You know, what cause were you representing?" I was like, "I was supposed to be representing a cause there. I didn't know that." Okay, so what cause were you representing? And that's when I learned that you had gotten this involved in the politics. So obviously they're sending you to some pretty big events.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming they're doing that under the letter carrier political fund coordinator role, or why was that why you were there?
More or less, yeah. Our local branch, we have a organization called PAL 9, and they're the old-fashioned thinking where, in theory, federal Congress representatives usually start at state level or in local government. And so our local PAL 9 donates money to the DFL in hopes to catch someone who's moving up's ear, right? Yep. So I was there in that regard, but our state association also had a table. So we had 2 tables there. But I was part of the PAL 9, branch 9.
So what is a letter carrier political fund coordinator? I got to keep reading this off the computer. It's a long title. What does that do?
So locally, it just tries to rally the troops, just educate carriers monthly, daily, if possible, on political things going on, both locally and nationally. Obviously, we're a federal agency, so to try to keep that in mind when I'm speaking. I'm not. There's someone else designated for a local person.
Yeah.
But yeah, just trying to educate carriers. Also to back politicians that back us.
Sure.
Yeah. And how did you get involved in that aspect of it?
Like I mentioned earlier, it was an open position. I'm naturally passionate about politics anyway, and so I figured might as well.
Yeah, I mean, love the shirt.
Yeah, yeah. This is another podcast. I think I sent you one of the episodes.
Yep.
Yeah. This is a good. No. This is within our own. Not a.
You can plug the podcast.
It's not an endorsed NALC podcast. It's actually a little bit of a rift within the. It's starting a movement.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is from 8 Arbitration Podcast. Corey Walton, carrier out of Nashville, Tennessee, puts it on.
Nice.
So.
All right. Well, we'll definitely check it out.
But yeah, politically wise, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
yeah, no, I was just curious because, like, again, I didn't know. It was something that I learned about you that day on Facebook, and that's kind of why I invited you on here to come talk about that kind of stuff, because we talk union stuff a lot, and obviously we talk about it a little out of turn because we're not in unions. We don't have much
in a union.
We just We like to be in support, have that solidarity, but having people who actually know what the fuck they're talking about and aren't just speaking from a purely subjective aspect. It's nice having that that weight.
Sometimes it feels like propaganda.
It really does.
Doing, you know?
It really does.
Like, we're not really in a position to be a part of like a brotherhood like that or whatever, but we're just like cheerleading from the sidelines.
Cultural appropriation, yeah. We're union in spirit.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It helps.
Exactly.
So yeah, I guess we've kind of moved on past. We understand what you're doing, kind of how you got involved, and I think that's a great point. I think we should talk about some of the benefits and maybe some of the frustrations you've had from being in the union. Is this your first foray into union life? Like, have you? I mean, obviously, you said your dad is a teacher.
Yep.
So he's been in the union, but had you ever considered being in a union prior to this? Had you ever been in a union prior to this?
So when I was out in Vegas, how this ties together, don't ask me. But the UAW actually represented the Flamingo dealers. So how auto workers tied into hospitality, I'm not I'm not quite sure, but I was part of the UAW when I was dealing at Flamingo. So that was my only previous experience with unions.
You have to drive to work, right?
Yeah. I have no idea.
And you never thought to ask? Like, that would have been one of my first questions. Like, first meeting, hand would have been up. Like,
why are we here?
Kind of remembering back then, because I think I did ask that question, and they were one of the few unions that actually wanted to represent them. You know,
Sure.
you have to shop around. You know, you go to a union and say, I would like your representation or be part of your bargaining unit.
Right. Or you start your own.
Or you could start your own.
It's sometimes difficult.
Right. And so a lot of times the national unions will actually go into the newer areas or unorganized areas and organize, because the national title usually carries some weight.
Sure.
So even though UAW had no idea what hospitality was, or maybe they do, I'm not familiar.
Right.
But just to have a bargaining unit on it with a big title like that usually carries some weight.
Sure. Kind of like the big lawyers coming into town, you know, helping out the little guys.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, good
Did
on
you
them.
get discounts on, like, new cars then?
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to picture what they're bargaining for.
I don't think any UAW union members get specifically union membership discounts.
I have no idea. I'm just like trying to like picture what like that meeting would look like.
Preferential hiring. You know, if you quit being a dealer, you can get first in line at a Ford factory. You know, I don't know.
Sure.
All right, so you had a little bit of experience though.
Minimal, yeah.
And now obviously you've got a lot more experience, and would you say it's been life-changing for you? Has it made notable effects in your life? Obviously you keep doing it, so it must be.
Yeah. It's in like a personal sense, it's given me purpose. You know, to be able to, because being a mailman, it's fine and dandy. It's very monotonous.
Yeah.
Sure. That's kind of the job everybody.
You got numbers on a
presumes is the job.
paper, and you match it to the numbers on the house,
Right.
and you walk the same route or the same 5 routes every year. You know, like just repetitive.
Right.
So I also needed something to change it up. So
Yeah.
you know, got involved with the union.
Speaking just of walking the routes and everything, completely unrelated, but that's been pretty impactful on your health, hasn't it?
Yeah. What's your step count every day?
In the thousands.
Yeah.
I don't wear a watch or anything kind of fitness tool.
Your phone doesn't have a pedometer or whatever?
It easily could. Yeah. Me and technology don't mix very well.
I'll find it for you once we're done with the episode.
Yeah.
I don't know. People have asked me the same thing when I'm out filming, because I walk around and they're like, "How many steps
I
do you
don't
put
know
on
if
in a
it-
day?"
I don't know if
Probably
you're
not
holding it.
anywhere close.
I think if you're holding it, it's
Yeah.
not going to count, but sometimes it does. I don't know.
But from February of 21 till August of 21, I lost approximately 110 pounds.
Wow.
That is amazing.
Yeah, that's
and like, because obviously I knew you before you started doing it, and so I saw the before and after with my own eyes, and we'd see each other infrequently enough where I really got the full like before and after.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when I saw the after, and I'm like, I don't even want to mention, because like I kind of feel like maybe you went and got like a
Surgery,
gastro bypass or something like that, and I'm like, I don't know, it feels rude to ask or like comment on it, but you look great, and it's literally just from walking around.
Walking, and a little bit was I don't ever encourage this, but when I was a newer carrier, not knowing my rights, not knowing the whole scope of things, not
Skipping lunch.
well, not necessarily skipping, but brisking by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sat for 15 minutes. I can, I better keep going. Or, they push you so hard that they'll give you 15 hours of work to do it in 12.
Yeah.
And so then, try and make sure your work gets done. That's also what led to my dietary
Dietary changes.
changes. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, there was many times where I'd get off of work at 8:30 at night, and I would race back up to my brother and sister-in-law's house, and there's a Culver's on the exit, and I would stop there and quickly chow down the kids' meal back to the house, and that was my meal for the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, calorie deficit, lots of steps. That's
Adds up,
that's the recipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
Nice.
So what are some of the biggest benefits of being in the union that you would tell somebody looking to join, or just that you found for yourself to be highly beneficial?
To have someone that is going to fight for me, to have an organization established to fight for me. I've been lucky enough to never have, previous to being in the post office, the idea of fearing for my job was never a thing.
Right.
But obviously it's out there, right? People, I mean, that is a tragic thing in America and in the world, that any day some of these people could just lose their job just for shits and giggles,
Right.
That was a big aspect to get involved, to come to a job with a well-established union, and then contract my benefits. A lot of my benefits don't compare to the private sector.
Yeah.
Currently, our contract has expired, so we're negotiating for a new one. Our pay isn't as great, but when you put dollars to benefits, my second year working for the post office, I think I made like $120,000.
Right.
Putting dollars to benefits, that wasn't my take home.
No, yeah, of course. But
so-
that's what the number that everybody talks about, especially around union talks. They're like, oh, like the FedEx and UPS when they were doing all that stuff. They were like, oh, your UPS workers are making $120,000. It's like, well, their take home's closer to like 60 or 70,
Right.
but like they're getting really pretty good solid benefits,
Yep.
which is obviously good. But obviously that take home is nice too.
Oh, I mean, I think UPS is now at like $50-some an hour at like that's their actual hourly pay.
Yeah, that could be. That could be.
I got a buddy who works for UPS, drives for UPS, and yeah, when he told me what their new union contract was, I was like, damn.
But I think kind of like with the post office, you hear the big numbers,
Yeah.
right? I told you the 5 carriers making over 200,000, but you got to look at what does the other 99% of the workforce earn.
Right.
Sure. The median, right?
And how fast do you get there? So
Yeah.
UPS might be at $50 top pay scale, but do they have to be 3 years of pre-career status or part-time help, and then they have to do another 3 years of moving up the full-time carrier or delivery pay scale? Well, now you're looking at 6 to 8 years potentially. I don't know the contract, but that's what we have a 13-year pay scale right now.
Yeah, that's
but in reality it's 15 because you could be CCA part-time for 2 years.
Which is what, I mean, you started out as that, right?
CCA, yeah.
And how long did you do that for?
18 months.
Okay. So you're, I mean, close-ish, you're over a year at it, so
Yeah.
a year and a half.
Yeah, I just think about like in the military, we had obviously there's pay scales for years of service, and then like it kind of as you go up in rank, like it kind of extends. Like you can get better pay for higher ranks if you've been in service for longer years. And I don't know, like I see like it's nice to know like what you'd be looking at, right? Like as you go in your career versus in the private sector. You could
just work hard and you'll probably get a good raise one day,
Right.
someday maybe.
Yeah, like there's
Probably.
no guarantee that you're even gonna get a cost of living raise year to year. So I definitely enjoyed that part of the military. Not that much of the military did I enjoy, but just having everything laid out for you seems very, very assuring.
Right. Sick leave too, benefits.
Yeah.
I get 13 vacation days annual. If you're a post office listener or military, that was the military term is annual time. So that's our PTO. And then I get 13 sick days. And then we get federal holidays as well. So that was another union thing that kind of attracted me was, I might work 80 hours a week, but, I can look at Memorial Day, end of the month, I got that day off. 4th of July, Thanksgiving, all the federal holidays. Plus then I have 13 days I could call in sick if need be.
Yeah, I mean, if you're working retail, you're not getting those days off.
No.
Not most of the time. Like, you get, like, what, half of Thanksgiving off, like, maybe Christmas Day if you work at, like, a really, like, conscious location. But
when I used to in high school and I pushed carts at Walmart, and and that was back in the days when they were 24/7, 365.
Sure.
I think they did shut down on Christmas Day for like half the day on Christmas, but otherwise, you were there. And I always took those hours because I needed money, but and they paid holiday pay for them. But it was holiday pay. I got my time and a half on my $7.25 an hour.
Yeah.
But the union stuff, and I think we harp on the benefits of it a lot, and I think everybody in the back of their head knows how unions are supposed to benefit. But we've had a lot of rhetoric over the years about how bad unions are, how they fuck everything up for everybody, and they're my favorite line, you hear it all the time, is there was a time and a place for unions, but that was in the past. Like today you don't need unions anymore because the billionaires have gotten much more benevolent, much nicer now. They don't try to steal from people anymore.
As Jeff Bezos buys his $90 million mansion, we don't need unions anymore.
And his like 5th mega yacht or some shit like
Remember
that.
the one mega yacht, they were like gonna have to like dismantle a bridge to get it out, and he was gonna have to pay for that, and then they're like, okay, we'll do it. So they started building it, and they're like, no, we changed our mind, we're not gonna let you take down the bridge. And so then they couldn't get the boat out. I wonder whatever happened with that. That was a good time.
Yeah, fuck Bezos. But anyway, so are there, obviously you've been on the inside and you're pretty higher level, is there anything that you could see? Obviously you had issues with your workplace, but like, did you see anything with the union that you were sort of like, I wish I could do that better? Or like, is there any way that it could be abused? Obviously we've seen a lot of cases in the past of unions being abused by people, just not looking out for actual workers. But like, what have you seen in your experience? Yeah,
I've seen it all. I've seen good things, bad things. Obviously we just got done talking about some of the good things about it. I should say also, I forgot to mention, one of my other hats is I'm a union organizer. So when new carriers come in, I sign them up for the union, try to get them signed up.
Sure. Keep that
advertise.
95%,
right. Keep the 95% up, right? But that is a good question. We do have people that come in and say, from rural Minnesota, well, my parents said that the unions have always been bad, or I had a bad experience with the previous union. And so a lot of times it's underrepresentation. As a NALC union, we represent ocean to ocean and territories. We have one contract, right? We're talking 210,000 carriers. There's going to be bound to be 1, 2, 3, 4 people that unfortunately don't get represented because they are in central, isolation Minnesota, where there's only 3 routes in that station, and unless there's a steward in that route in that station, you're subject to then the national business agent who covers the region. And unfortunately, they do fall through the cracks. And even in Minneapolis, where we do have a stewards in each station. I oversee 35, 40 carriers, and not every one of them is going to come to the union steward and say, hey, management just did this to me. How can we help? What can you do for me?
But they're going to get that bad taste in their mouth of the union didn't protect me from this situation happening in the first place.
Right. They're going to see it as like, I'm the all-seeing eye. I'm the steward. I should have known. Well, I've got a million things in my mind.
So you have a full-time job doing your job,
plus my job, right?
Yeah.
So, and then also too, like I mentioned, one contract, 210,000+ carriers. There's going to be people that aren't happy with the way we negotiate. So in the Midwest, this is a big topic going into our national convention here in August. Talks amongst carriers. We have mandatory overtime still. That's part of our contract. We have mandatory overtime.
Mandatory overtime.
We can work up to 12 hours a day, 60 hours a week. Okay, that's our contract.
And you can't say no to that.
Unless specific restrictions or occasions, whatever circumstances come up, we can say no. But our contract is $12.60.
Sure.
And so here in the Midwest and in smaller branches, we're advocating for getting rid of mandatory overtime. I want to work I want to make a living in 40, right? And I want to go home in 40.
Right. Work-life balance.
You talk to the carriers out on the coastal lines, or higher cost of living cities, they're going to say, no, I need that overtime.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to try to advocate for that many thousands of carriers, you're not going to make everyone happy. And then unfortunately, some people just say, well, if you're not going to make me happy as an individual, I'm just going to drop out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like I don't envy the juggling task of that contract.
It's that double-edged sword because, like, obviously, the more members you have, the more dick swinging power the union has. The bigger the union, the more negotiating power they have. But then again, you have a lot more needs that you need to cover that, in some cases, just as impossible. Obviously, like what you were just talking about there, and that's
I mean, there's got to be some sort of labor practices that can work for both of those. I would think it's got to be a little bit more nuanced than just like I'm not like in it, but I just think of like all the business practices and like all the unions out there. Certainly somebody has like figured out how to sort of deal with the geographical like cost of living issue and maybe.
I mean, you should be able to tie like cost of living to region that, like, if you're employed in this region, your base pay is tied to that cost of living and done. I mean, obviously, like, you can't live in LA and live at the same price you can, live here in rural Minnesota. So it would be ridiculous to be paid the same in both of those places.
Yep.
Obviously it'd be great if you got paid the cost of living of what they were in LA. So that would be one way to do it, is just give everybody that super high amount. But then obviously
we do it COLAs.
Right.
And so it's not based off of regions, just the national average of cost of living. And so someone who lives in Pine City, as a full-time carrier, and me who lives in Minneapolis, we're going to get the same COLA. Well, cost of living is a little bit different than in Pine City than it is in Minneapolis,
Right.
So
does the base pay rate, is that nationally set as well, or is that
national? Yep.
So the people in LA get hired on at the same rate you got hired on at here in Minnesota.
Yep. CCAs right now I think are $19.33 an hour. And
which that's a not like crazy high number, but it's substantial.
I mean, I was thinking it was pretty low considering the job, and again considering the fact that at $19 an hour to live in a place like New York or LA would be
true. Yeah, no, outside of Minnesota, in those bigger cities, I could see how 19 an hour is woefully.
When I started, it was $17.29 an hour.
Sure.
So we've already made progress in that regard.
Yeah.
Part-time help, PTF. Post office is hiring at 23 and some change an hour, but no federal benefits or holidays. Excuse me.
Yeah,
they do get benefits, but no federal holidays. Yeah.
All right. So like, what's on the bad side? Because again, we always hear about these things where unions. I still have yet to hear an actual like specific argument about how unions are so bad. Like they'll say like, oh, I
they
guess
just take your dues.
Yeah.
They don't do anything.
The thing that I've heard from working is that management doesn't feel like they need a third party to mediate their relationship with their employee.
Yeah, management doesn't. The employee does.
Right. No, exactly. Like the lead, like that's what Amazon says, is that like we don't need a union because we don't want our relationship with our employees to change. We think it's a good relationship.
I bet they do.
I'm sure they do. But that's their rationale. It's completely asinine, especially when you consider like people die in Amazon warehouses just doing their freaking job. But
actually, I do know the number one thing I always hear as the criticism for unions is like they protect the bad workers and punish the good workers because you can't get fired if you're in a union, and I mean, and that's bullshit. I know plenty of people who've been in a union who've lost their job because they don't show up to work on time or they don't do their job. It's not a guaranteed get out of jail free card. You've got a job to go to in the morning type of thing. It's just a it's a stopgap from allowing them to just fire you for no reason whatsoever.
Anyone. It's what I use the saying, what's good for me is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
If they can fire me just because I blink wrong, they're going to fire you because you blink wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
The union doesn't protect necessarily the bad person, and we don't also make it clear most unions don't protect people; they protect a contract.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I always tell carriers too: is when they get pissed at me, so and so just called in for the last month and they still have a job. Well, yeah, because the contract says this, and management. I also put the blame on management. Management didn't do their part on making sure the discipline was appropriate.
Yeah.
They've got every manual and handbook in front of them that they can, we need to do a job discussion, letter of warning, 7 days,
And I'm sure you're not necessarily going to management saying like, "Hey, this guy's doing this. You need to like discipline them like in an appropriate manner, unless it's overboard."
Very rarely does, in my opinion, should a steward ever go to management and basically narc
rat out,
narc on the carriers, right? But there are some instances where it needs to be done. A toxic work environment.
Sure.
If a carrier is out of line,
Yeah.
then management does need to. They've got a obligation to provide dignity and respect on the workroom floor.
Right. I got other workers that are being affected.
Right. Or safety. If someone just got done with a domestic violence case or, situation at home, and now they're coming into work and they're bringing that with them, it's now the safety of my carriers and the station is at risk,
Absolutely, that makes sense. So have you ran into that? Because that is the biggest one I always hear is like, it's just unions make everybody lazy and nobody wants to do their job because they can't get fired. Have you run into that where it's been where you felt like some of your the people that you've worked with have maybe been allowed to stick around longer than they should have, or made your life more difficult because of the union?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But like I just said, though, what's good for me is good for him or them or she or whoever. Do I get pissed at times? 1,000%. Even as a steward, there's been times where I feel dirty coming out of the manager's office protecting a carrier because put my personal feelings aside,
you're filling a role,
right? I am obligated to be a steward,
uphold the contract, right?
I also like to point out for that particular argument too that like I've never been in a union and I've worked a lot of non-union jobs. And I know a lot of people who work a lot of non-union jobs, and I can say that pretty much the only universal thing I've heard from everybody who's ever worked a job, regardless of what it is they bitched about their coworkers not doing their job. So, it's not really like it's one of those things where I feel like they pick a problem that's universal and be like, nope, it's because of the unions only in this specific situation. So,
and that argument's objective, right? I mean, if you ask me, I'm going to say I'm the hardest worker in the station. Right?
Sure.
You ask Jordan, he's going to say he's the hardest worker. I mean, what's the definition of working harder than someone else? I just mind your business, do your job, and the rest will fall in place.
Right? Yeah. I mean, usually people's jobs don't impact like somebody else directly, especially I see in post office. Like, if you don't fulfill your route, right, then that's on you. Nobody else. Well,
yeah.
Okay.
To a certain extent. I mean. At the end of the day, the mail has to go out at whatever cost necessary.
Sure.
Right. And so there's times where you pay people on medical restriction, or if you're on an overburdened route, management
start shuffling you around and asking you to pick up.
Right. There's been many times where I get done with my route, I get done with my overtime assignment, and then I also get a text message or a scanner message saying, "Hey, so and so's got 5 more blocks to deliver, and it's 8:00 at night. Can you please go take 2 of them?" And then I easily could have gotten in that mindset saying, well, what the hell is that guy doing? But instead it's like, well, I don't know what did that person get involved with the dog? Did they twist an ankle? Whatever the case may be, so.
Yeah, no, that's all fair. I could see if, day after day, you see that same guy being brought up or other people talking about, then you start being like, hey, is this the route, or is the management just fucking this guy over?
Yeah.
Or is this guy just really not pulling his weight?
Yep.
And that's when I could see like a legitimate problem being brought up. But,
yep.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, bad workers exist everywhere.
Every single job.
And that's I don't know.
I had a dealer in Vegas that showed up to work drunk. That puts a bad image on me.
Yeah.
It makes me upset because now that table isn't open, and as a tip job, I need most tables need to be open for players to sit to tip, right?
Do you guys pool tips then as dealers on the floor?
Yep.
So yeah,
most places do.
Most
Yep.
places, sure.
Because if
Yeah.
it wasn't pooled, then that'd be to your advantage. But I
Oh,
suppose
yeah.
pooled tips, then you're losing one table that's drawing tip revenue. So yeah, I
Yep.
know that makes sense. All right, but obviously you found that the good outweighs the frustrations and the bad and the headaches of being in a union so far.
So I learned several years ago, the cousin that I lived with in Vegas, he taught me a very important lesson.
Mm-hmm.
A weak union is better than no union at all,
You know,
right? So even though, I get frustrated at times, there's a lot more power that's being withheld from the rank and file from our union, and we're trying to change that. But, I would say I'm happy that we've got, I have the opportunity that I have,
Right.
no.
Most people don't.
I mean, obviously you've stuck with this job. Well, you were talking about turnover earlier, and the turnover rate's really super high, especially for new hires and stuff. And you stuck through that. And I know for a while you were really just itching to get back to go to dealing in Vegas, and that tune's kind of changed now. It seems like you're pretty set here on the post office job for the long haul.
It's funny what career benefits can do for you. When you're
Right.
when you're getting $17.29 an hour, the only two benefits I was getting is health insurance and vacation time. It's like even those 18 months don't get credited for my retirement for the post office. I'm hoping I'm going to plug this to HR 5995. That's a bill in the U.S. Rep
Okay.
House right now that, if passed, would allow me to buy back my time, kind of similar to military. I can buy back my years of service and get credited for my retirement.
So what do you mean buying back? How does that work?
So as a non-career employee, I was not paying into the pension program. I was not putting anything in retirement.
Right.
My years itself don't count, right?
No.
And so by buying that back, I could make up catch up contributions to reflect what I would have gotten for those 18 months, plus added years of service. So I luckily happened to convert at an age where I will retire at 57 with 30 years of service.
Nice.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I could retire at 57 with 31 and a half years of service if I could buy back those 18 months.
Right.
Which
Right.
would, speed up my pension, so.
Yeah. No, that seems really seems like a no-brainer sort of thing. Help everybody out.
Yeah.
I mean, the pensions always need more money up front, right? Like
Yep.
that's sort of how it works.
But then it would increase your pay. We'll talk about that more in a minute. I was curious because I want to kind of get some more overarching union stuff after this. Obviously, you've got some stuff to plug here. But you got future plans for your union involvement?
Yeah. Obviously, to shoot for the moon, everyone's dream as a union activist and is to be the national president, right?
Sure.
Do I think that's a reality? I don't think so.
Hey, give it a couple years. I don't know, man.
We'll see. But slowly move up. Become a trustee or something. Become something more of a whole official title within my local branch, and then move up from there. But yeah, just trying to educate is another big important thing. Whether I stay involved or not, just trying to educate about our union.
So, but I mean, I know you were just filling kind of vacant roles when you stepped into this, but you do have aspirations. Like, it's been rewarding enough where you want to try to take more deliberate steps to move further up in union leadership.
Yeah, I mean, some of it too has been the current shortcomings. I mean, the best way to, like I said, with bad management, the best way to keep people active is to not do a good job and have them be the voice for change, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I'll always be doing that.
Awesome. All right. So you just plugged the bill. I know that when we met at the Humphrey Mondale dinner, that's why you flagged down Warnock to talk to him, try to get your support for that bill on his radar. But you have a few things that you're working on. Obviously, the contract, the expired contract. Anything else that's going on that you're really?
So currently, nationally, our union is pushing for another bill, HR 7629. Its acronym is POCA, which is very fitting for Minnesota. We love our polka bands, right?
Yeah, sure.
but it's Protect Our Letter Carrier Act. I mean, we've discussed before.
Yeah.
Carriers have just been attacked nonstop on routes across the country, and this bill would help.
Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I don't know if other people know about the fact that letter carrier is a not necessarily a safe job.
Yeah. Well, as safe as one would think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I started, that was another many reasons why I came here. I was like, well, I'm a federal employee. It's going to be a great job. We're protected. Everyone loves their mailman, right? Mail carrier.
Yeah.
And then in the last year, particularly, I have seen that that's not the case in every neighborhood. Not everyone loves the mail carrier.
Like I don't. I
Wow.
mean, we've had some. I haven't had some bad experiences like with my mailmen, but I know like some of my neighbors are, I think, gotten a little old-timey conspiracy on like, oh, she's withholding mail, like she doesn't like me, got a grudge against me or whatever. But
Yeah.
aside from that, like I've never experienced anybody who has resentment towards a mailman.
I will say it's not necessarily like personal. During the riots and civil unrest, I think it's been more so an ideology. Like we represent the government, and so like they're not necessarily attacking me because of who I am. It's because of the badge I wear.
Sure.
Or the service I represent.
Yep.
And then also the things we have. I mean, as a mail carrier, we don't just deliver junk mail.
Right.
We deliver important things.
Checks,
And
personal information.
Right. Everything above the sun, or below the sun. So yeah, they come after us for that. I mean, I had an issue on my route. A lady was stealing mail. I have a video of her opening up mail. Right. I caught her red-handed.
She was like coming up behind you as you were going and like open up mail.
No,
or
I mean,
just-
it's a wide variety of tactics. I mean, I'd be going down one side of the block and she's going down the other, or like she'd be getting off of her walk in the neighborhood night shift, and just having a whole backpack full of mail,
What
right,
the
and just
fuck?
opening it up on some street corner,
What?
right. And so then, she was just taking people's personal information, and so I called the postal inspectors, like we were supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And they educated me on a new tactic that was going around at the time, that some uppity up of the crime ring families or whatever would hire these homeless people
Sure.
to commit the crime, meet them at some designated area, right, and then exchange the information. I don't know how widespread that is.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was only like 5 cases,
Yeah.
and then now they just think it's a widespread thing. I don't know. But yeah, that was a real concern at the time, was, take homeless advantage, taking advantage of them.
Just reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where Kramer tries to enlist homeless people to be rickshaw drivers. Says they're already outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same thing.
So then fast forward to just a couple months ago, I personally got threatened on my route. Yeah. For looking at someone. I got threatened to be shot. For
You
looking
looked at him
someone.
wrong?
I looked at him wrong.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. I got to uncross the eyes. But I called the police, and something that came to my mind when I was on the phone call with them was, imagine having the keys to the city and only a dog horn or dog mace to protect you from an attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how widespread, the Postal Service wants me to say all this information, right? But there are things that we have that are very intriguing to criminals that they want,
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
That
if you're-
$5 from grandma and the,
Yeah.
and the birthday card. And
I get a scratch off from my aunt.
there you go. You never know. It could be the big one.
Right.
Or so back when I was going through orientation, there was a interesting fact that I stuck with me. The Hope Diamond, what is it, like $50 million, like some astronomical millions of dollars, right? Traveled to the post office at that time like 13 times.
Wow.
Like not every item's that expensive, but we do carry very important information and stuff. And
Right. It was kind of like, delivery drivers used to get robbed for like delivering pizza and shit because they'd be carrying cash from all their deliveries on them. And so now, like when I worked at Domino's, they like really made it clear like delivery drivers only carry $20 on them in cash
Right.
every delivery.
Mm-hmm.
I assume for scenarios similar to that.
Yep.
Oh, that's crazy. So I mean, but it's important to know because that's obviously. So what was the bill again?
Polka.
Polka bill,
Mhm.
HR 7629. Just out of Minnesota, as of this morning, the only representative that has signed on is Angie Craig. And she's been a huge advocate for letter carriers on the
It's a
U.S.
W
Capitol.
for Angie.
Yeah, she's been a huge voice for carriers. Can't thank her enough for that. Anytime I've reached out to her office, be like, hey, this bill's coming up, within a day or two, she's looked into it and signed on or gave feedback, whatever.
Awesome.
But, yep.
We recently criticized her with her
Yeah.
recent TikTok bill
I've been a little frustrated
voting.
with her for coming
really?
after my line of
Yeah.
work. but-
Okay.
She voted for the ban.
Yeah. Both
which-
times.
which we obviously don't agree with
Yeah.
in any way. But,
And
you know,
yeah,
we gotta
her-
give the W's when the W's are due. So.
absolutely.
But
And
at least I'm glad that
Uh-huh.
representation has treated you guys
Yeah.
fairly. I mean, no matter how they vote on for stuff that we like, it's good that they are responsive at least to concerns.
And I will say, like, because I did a political figure episode on Angie prior to the TikTok. Jesus Christ, man!
Wow.
I'm
Hey,
I'm
Nancy.
about ready for a Senate hearing here.
Didn't Pelosi do that TikTok?
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't connect to the face data.
Yeah.
But prior to that, and I had. It was a very positive video. I still have respect for her. I try not to throw the baby out with the bathwater on. And nobody's ever going to vote the way that you want them to vote 100% of the time.
Right.
Obviously, I've had a little bit of frustration with her overwhelming support for actions in Israel and funding that. And obviously, a lot of frustration with the TikTok thing, and that obviously affects me pretty directly because a sizable portion of my income comes from that, and that. Literally, you just banned or voted to ban my job, so I had a little bit of salty feelings about it. But,
Absolutely.
But no,
and the whole First Amendment, just free speech sort of thing.
The Constitution, kind of
Small things.
small things, little things.
Well,
But-
and that's one thing as a coordinator, I've always, because we have people that have your similar viewpoints, right? We cover such a wide variety of carriers. Not every carrier thinks alike, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
And so, as a union, we always advocate solely on postal policy.
Yep.
And people, just as you explained with the TikTok ban, it's the same thing. Carriers advocate for the Polka bill because it's my job and I want to protect it.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, that's a little bit different. It's like a direct
A physical attack.
Yeah, it's also like in the line of your work.
Yeah.
So but that seems like a no-brainer. I don't know exactly what entails with the bill, but I'm assuming it just gives you.
I mean, if you want to know, I can give you a
let us know.
quick 3
Give us
bullet
a
points.
quick- yeah.
So it would up the penalties. So right now
Okay,
in California and San Francisco,
sure.
a carrier that was robbed at gunpoint got
Yeah.
30 days in jail.
Yeah, that
okay.
seems like a low bar for any gunpoint robbery.
Yeah,
much
like-
less a federal employee.
Right.
I feel like if you rob anybody at gunpoint, you should be going for a while
At
longer.
least a
Yeah.
couple months to like a year, whatever.
But the
I don't know. your
problem is, though,
circumstance.
the same crime in Mississippi was 5 years.
Mm.
Yeah, that
so-
seems a little excessive.
Right. This bill would put equitability in the crime, meaning
Sure.
cities can't prosecute for 30 days. There's
Right.
there's
It'd
a
be a
minimum.
federal mandate. You attacked a federal employee,
Right.
and therefore this is the federal minimum for that crime. Which that makes sense.
I mean, we have my spidey senses go off every time I hear federal minimum sentences.
Yeah,
but,
that's a fair
but,
point.
yeah.
That is a fair point.
some guidelines on sentencing
Yeah.
seems like a
Right.
really good idea. So
And then also infuse the post office with cash. So we are trying to update our infrastructure to devalue some of the assets we have as carriers. And so they're going to put $7 billion into the post office for us to update some of our infrastructure.
Yeah.
Primarily collection boxes, the blue boxes you see in your neighborhood.
yeah,
For one, they're just out of date. They're rusty as hell, and you need a paint job, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
But there's some technology in there that we're going to put into it.
Okay.
So,
All right, nice. How about the electric carrier cars?
Don't get me started. Those things are the stupidest
Oh
thing
my
ever.
god, those things look like a freaking rubber duck that's painted white with red and blue stripes.
So
like, Jesus Christ.
I was at a facility this last week and happened to come across one of our vehicle trainers. Excuse me. And he gave me some, different points on the beneficial use of those vehicles.
Mhm.
And so it's very similar measurements to the 2-ton,
Right.
which is big, right?
Yeah.
But it's also got the same capability to have us drive in the neighborhood and sit low enough to do mounted routes.
Yeah, sure.
So it sucks that the design looks stupid, 1,000%.
Yeah.
But
It's functional at least.
it's designed to benefit the post office.
Sure.
I think to try to eliminate having multiple vehicles in your fleet, to try to limit to only maybe 2 or 3 instead of like the 10 that we've got or whatever 6 we got.
Yeah.
So yeah, but do I think they're going to work out? I don't think so.
No.
I really don't.
Why not?
I mean, it didn't
Well,
seem
just
like
the-
the postmaster had like that much buy-in when like all that stuff was going down. But maybe I'm
just
wrong.
the infrastructure itself. I mean, how do you charge an electric vehicle?
When it's sitting on the corner of your block of your route.
Well,
right?
even at your station, you have to plug it in, right? You got to
Yeah.
have enough ampage coming to your station to charge 30, 40, 50, 60 vehicles at a
Yeah,
time.
that's a lot of 220-volt.
It's a lot of
lines.
voltage, a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of our post offices cannot support that,
Yeah,
at least in my belief, right?
sure.
So
Well,
some
I
of the
mean,
newer buildings, LA area, I think
Mhm.
there's a plant out there, Palomito, Georgia, if I'm pronouncing that right. And then Richmond, Virginia, I think all have transferred over to the SNDC model, I think it's called. And they've got electric charging stations there, which is where a lot of these vehicles are being first implemented because they've got the infrastructure there.
Sure.
And I mean, it'll come as a. I don't know what the rollout plan is for these electric trucks, but obviously,
I would assume they start in the metro areas where electric
Mhm.
vehicles are more widely adopted.
Yeah, I think my understanding they're going to be implemented primarily in the South first
Yeah, sure. That
Um,
makes sense.
because the post office is notorious for just buying in bulk, and bulk doesn't work for every region,
Yeah.
right? I mean, those old LLVs, long life vehicles, I think is what it stands for. They were tested in like the desert in Arizona. Are we in the desert in Arizona and Minnesota?
Right. No.
So like to buy that many vehicles in bulk.
Hey,
with-
but long life. I mean, what they were building them back in like the 80s, right? And you guys are still driving those.
yeah,
fucking
they're still a
things.
hazard today. Yeah.
Right? You guys,
But it was an accurate long life. I mean, by force or not, they're still out
Right.
there. That's an impressive lifespan for a vehicle.
well,
Yeah, they're still operating. I mean,
Mhm.
there's still many stations that do have them.
I don't know what the federal government is good at or bad at, but I know for sure they're good at getting vehicles built for a cheap rate, and they last for fucking ever. Just look at how many Humvees and all like
All the
Army-
80s GM trucks
Yeah.
that are the military was
Right.
probably still using to this day. Yeah.
I don't know what they did or how they pulled it off, but like somehow they did at least that one thing right
Well, just
or wrong, I guess.
Yep.
maintenance and lots of they've got a big budget to use up, so they can throw a lot of parts
True,
at shit
true.
and keep it. Not the post office doesn't really have a big budget to use up, but the military, they're like,
Yeah.
just throw more parts at it.
True.
Got to
That's-
burn
that's
money.
fair. That's fair.
So is that what else do you got for big overview stuff you're trying to plug here and stuff that you work on that you just want people to be aware of?
I mean, we've mentioned it at the beginning, but our expired contract. I mean,
So you're still operating under the terms of the expired contract.
Yeah.
So like at least like you're not.
we're not totally getting
Yeah.
screwed. But obviously, we're not getting any added benefits. yet.
Why has it been so difficult to get a contract that isn't old milk?
We're dealing with the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy.
How the fuck has he not been replaced yet? Like
He was appointed by Trump, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
his whole mission was like, it's my job to run the post office. into the ground, like off a cliff. Just run it anywhere but well.
And he's doing a good job of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
It wasn't even like a hidden agenda. He came in with the intent of wrecking the post office. Like that was his whole plan, which is just insane. Like hire somebody to do the worst job possible on purpose, and that was it. They weren't even like quiet about it. They're like, nope, he's gonna wreck it. So it just goes away because nobody uses the post office, right? What do you need the post office for?
Yeah.
So yeah, why is he still there? Do you know why? I mean, he should have been reappointed by now, I would assume, but I don't know really how a postmaster general gets appointed.
So
Unappointed.
we have a board of governors, right? And they get nominated is it nominated by the president and appointed by the Senate or confirmed by the Senate? And so we do have positions open. I think Biden has filled 2 or 3 of them already, and he's got 2 more nominated right now.
So is this similar to like what we would think of like Supreme Court nominations? Like if they don't retire, then they get to stay?
There are term limits.
Okay.
The works of it, I don't know the detail.
Sure.
I think it's like 3 to 5 year term limits or something like that. You know, or if you're the head of the board of governors, you get a 5-year term limit. You know, I'm not sure. I should know. I mean, these are my bosses, but I should know. But yeah, Biden does not have the power to just one off DeJoy. You know, you're done. We can Congress can put political pressure, and they have. April 16th, there was a U.S. Senate hearing. And DeJoy did a lot of so's, and I don't know, and a lot of stuttering because of the failure that was highlighted. He didn't have an answer for. How do you answer for 16% first-class delivery rate last month in Georgia?
16%.
16%.
Wow.
For if you're sending a letter from Atlanta within the inner city of Atlanta. The oversight committee said, there should be a 2-day generous window, right? You should be getting letters across the city within 2 days at the most, right?
Right.
And they only met that standard 16% of the time.
Holy cow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so the board of governors has to sack him then?
Yeah.
So how did Trump get the ability to appoint him in the first place?
Because my belief would be then, without looking too deep into it, he appointed enough board of governors to support DeJoy's nomination.
I gotcha.
Because I think, if I remember, the Senate at the time wasn't enough to confirm a Trump appointee, right? I don't think that there was the demographic of the Senate wasn't big enough to vote in DeJoy.
But is it why haven't they done?
Because there's not enough board of governors to oust him yet.
Okay.
So I think
Congress
there's 2
is kind of playing lockdown with some governors and some.
Right. Yeah.
Classic. Feels like a very, I don't want to say low stakes SCOTUS situation.
Right.
For the post office.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's frustrating. Yeah, he's definitely one of the biggest failures of the head of a government agency I think we've ever seen in the history of this country, which is saying something because that's a pretty low bar. Like you should be able to not be the worst of, and he's
especially of a federal agency.
Yeah.
I mean, we deliver to every door in America most days, right? And for him to tank the agency the way he has, Senator Ossoff out of Georgia said it perfectly. To a response from Ossoff, Joy said, give me 90 days and I can fix it. And Ossoff said, 90 days, or 60 days, whatever it was, you have 14 days to turn the ship around or you're not fit to be out in this position. When we're dealing with medication, veterans benefits, coming through the mail. The global economic chain comes through the post office, right? We're not isolated to that, right? And when you're slowing mail down daily, that has a big effect, right? And to tell someone I'm going to give me 60 days. Well, it shouldn't have gotten this far to begin with.
No. And
we have the resources to fix it quicker. You're just choosing not to, right? So I hope he's gone, soon, because this is an election year.
Yeah.
Right.
And if so, I mean, it could go either way at this point. It's looking sketchy. So
Yeah.
It's,
And some states do mail-in ballots, right?
mhm.
And if they get delivered late, you're going to vote late, and then you're going to put it back in the mail late, right? And who's to say it's going to get to the election office on time?
Yeah. Not to mention, we
right.
don't need any more excuses about mail-in voting
Oh my
being
God.
unreliable or not okay or whatever.
yeah, do you have any a take on that, or like any personal like just like situations that have come up with mail-in ballots or anything that you've seen? Obviously, no like fraud, but just like in general, like have you heard anything? Just like
Have you been
about,
in favor of the
about
mail-in
mail-in
vote? I mean, I'm sure
ballots?
it's a lot more work on you guys to handle mail-in voting,
Yep.
which I'm sure is frustrating. But obviously, being politically minded, mail-in voting increases access to people who normally struggle to vote or wouldn't vote otherwise. So it's got some benefits there. And like, what's your take on it, having to deal with the pros and cons of it?
I love it. You know, obviously it's more work for me throughout my day if I
Yeah.
have to deliver 1,300 ballots, but you know, not to get egotistical, but I take pride in that. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, no, for sure.
servicing my country in that regard to have, whether I don't care who you vote for,
Yeah.
just the idea that I'm one of the many hands making our democracy function. You know,
Yeah.
is
Hell
pretty
yeah, man.
important.
It's awesome, and that's an awesome perspective to have on it, because it could very easily be like, this is more fucking shit I gotta do, and get your ass out of bed and go to the fucking ballot box, and
But when it comes to like the political mail, like individually, when all these senators, representatives, and mayors, I mean, all these people,
The
they
super PAC sending all the flyers.
send
and
out
shit.
all those flyers.
Yeah,
You know, personally, that's the worst.
yeah,
a lot more weight. Right?
Oh my god! And they don't fit in the mailbox, and they
because they always got weird sizes and
Oh, yeah.
everything.
They're always really
yeah.
like this freaking big.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's like in there sideways, and then you got to get it in there with everything else, and and then you know that the people getting it are literally going to throw it in the trash, like in the trash can outside the house before they even walk in.
I joke with my customers like that, not necessarily on political mail, just junk mail in general. That, they got a trash can right at the door, and I'm still like in process of delivering it, and they're already like hand motion down to the garbage can. And I'm like, can you at least wait for me to leave the property? Can I get to the next mailbox before you throw this one away?
Right.
But speaking of ballots, some election year again, so you're ramping up to do the process again, and what do you think's important for people to consider before they head to the ballot box? Obviously you have your own political beliefs and views, but the post office is something that affects every American. Like you said, you deliver to every door in the country, and even the stuff that Amazon obviously is trying to do their own delivery stuff, but for all the shit that they don't feel like delivering to, and like my area, the mailman delivers a lot of my stuff still, because Amazon ain't gonna go take a rural route. It's just not profitable for them, where they can
You
obviously.
heard about Bemidji, right? Not too long ago, Bemidji went from having Amazon delivery service to all of a sudden the rural carriers, I think specifically, all of a sudden got an influx of like 300 packages a day from Amazon, because like you just said, it's not cost effective for them to go out there. They'll just send us, the postal service, out to those rural areas, or less cost effective for them.
Which means that we are subsidizing Amazon's mailing services.
Oh, big time.
And
Another one bites the dust.
Yep.
Another subsidy for big business.
Yep.
which is frustrating, because obviously they want the really dense routes that are more profitable for the mail service. So obviously that's the routes that you guys would prefer to have for those kinds of things as well, because that makes the post office more solvent.
Yep.
Because we continue to pretend like the post office should be a business and not a tax funded service, which is what it should be.
Well, it's by the way, it's not a tax
No,
funded
I know.
service. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, right. Didn't it start out tax funded and then it transitioned to fully privately funded, or what? Private, but self funding.
Yep. And also self-funded is a loose term. I mean, we lost like $6.8 billion last year. But yeah, so
But again,
history.
I hate. I just want to point out, I hate when people say that the post office lost money, because the post office isn't losing money. The
Yeah.
post office is providing a public service. It's like, saying the police department lost however many billions of dollars, or the
Military.
the military lost,
Yep.
$700 billion. Like, we don't look at it for any other government service or department in that way. Why are we looking at it at the post office? Like, this is the way
Well,
that
except for the audit whole thing with the military, we can kind of say they lost money. but-
right, yeah. Well, they
but normally
literally
speaking,
lost.
Yeah,
They
they
didn't
literally
lose it as
don't know
in,
where it
like-
went. But
It's a different type of
You
loss.
got a good point. You got a good point.
So I want people to remember that is like the post office isn't designed to be a business. You have FedEx and you have UPS, and you're not mailing your letters through them, and you're not going to go or spend $20 to do that. And so if we want to have a service that delivers things, and I mean that's our economy runs through the mail, especially more now than ever. Like, we thought that with the invention of email and telecommunications that the post office was going to go the way of the dodo, because we don't need to communicate. But now people don't leave their house to shop anymore, and it's become less letter, more package, I assume. But
Yep.
it's still important. Like, people really value that, and really, I think, learned to value that during COVID, when everything was shut down, and it was risking your life for a lot of situations to go to the grocery store if you needed to. So it's a service that helps everybody, and it should be a subsidized service, so everybody can afford it. And so I get really frustrated when people say that the post office loses money, because obviously that's a big criticism of the post office all the time. That was one of DeJoy's rhetoric and talking points. And I want people to have the correct perspective on that. So I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I thought that was a
No,
good
that's
time
very
to plug
good.
that.
Yeah, you said it better than I could. I too get frustrated when I hear that rhetoric. Oh, you're losing money. Well, businesses lose money. Services don't. And so, yeah. I always try to point out too, we are a public service agency, right? Federal agency. We are in the U.S. Constitution as a service. We cannot close up shop overnight legally. I mean, it takes a lot of work for us to be privatized. UPS, FedEx, Amazon, if they wanted to screw their shareholders and have some other motives, they close up shop tonight. They could say at midnight tonight, we're a private business. We have every right to shut it down. Post office doesn't. We can't. Legally, we cannot. And so that's another thing that I hope people take away too is it's a service,
Yeah.
We are, come hell or high water, we're going to be there. Hurricanes down south and,
Right.
the wildfires in Hawaii and, Southern California. Soon after, mail carriers were right there,
Right.
Yep.
So
Rain, wind, sleet, and snow, or
hurricane, tornado,
Yeah.
and
Right.
no, it's insane to me that people attack it as much as they do. Like, and again, it's
well, and it's 73 cents is what postage is going up to. Okay. If you go to UPS and say, I want you to send this piece of paper all the way up to the northern tip of Alaska for 73 cents, do you think they would do it?
Hell no.
No. Same thing, Minneapolis, if I were to say, I want this 73 cents to go to Puerto Rico, do you think they would do it? No.
they probably wouldn't do it for like 3 doors down your own block. You know, I mean, who's going to touch that for that that price? And that's where sorry, I was trying to figure out. I was just looking through to see if I could figure out how much the post office adds to GDP, and I'm not finding anything quick enough here.
So you mentioned economics, right? With the post office, big supporter. We're also, I hate to admit it, a big part of the illegal trade.
Sure.
So
mailing like drugs and stuff, I've heard.
I don't know what time frame this was all happening, but part of the Senate hearing on April 16th, about the only good news that came out of his mouth was postal inspectors and other federal task force got together, and out of the Kansas City post office itself, they collected estimated about 66,000 tablets of fentanyl.
Oh, wow.
Out of the mail service.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's just like a drop in the bucket. I'm sure there's millions more out there, but I mean, that's another thing to keep in mind too, that, we protect. I mean, we all remember the anthrax attacks, right?
Yeah. Right.
That's another thing,
Yeah, any of you Fox viewers out there, post office, they're stopping fentanyl.
Yeah,
they're
we're stopping fentanyl.
it. You know?
Yeah.
Our border can't sometimes, but our post office does.
That's right.
So these are some of the things I was trying to highlight. People should keep in mind when they head to the ballot box, because obviously appointing DeJoy has been catastrophic for the Postal Service.
Yeah.
And it's something that, like, us being a little bit more politically aware are probably more in tune to than most, but still, it's not something that I think about every day. It's not something that it directly impacts my life, but it doesn't directly impact my life in a way that is in your face apparent. And a lot of these things people forget about. It's not an issue they consider when they vote. But, if DeJoy is ultimately successful at being unsuccessful, which is what he's trying to do, we could lose it altogether or make it so useless of a service that it's not worth using at all. Just the impacts that would have on people's lives would be catastrophic. Obviously, you talked about people getting their medications and their VA benefits and all that kind of stuff. But just specific things that we don't think about like that. Is there things that you want people to keep in mind when they head to the ballot box this year and cast their vote about the Postal Service, about unions in general? Just to hopefully have it on their radar that may make them help them make a decision if they're on the fence about anywhere down the ballot box. Because we always talk about presidents, but Congress, you're talking about Angie Craig, listening to you guys and supporting these things. You got a moment of Senator Warnock's time from Georgia, because he was the keynote speaker at that DFL event, to put it on his radar as well. And just what do you think you really wish people would consider when they go vote?
Biggest, as a broad statement, workers' rights.
Mm-hmm.
Nikki Haley, thank God she didn't get the nomination. As much she might be the better choice than Trump, right? But the anti-union rhetoric, anti-worker rhetoric coming out of her mouth is pretty scary. People don't. Let's not forget who runs the country.
Mm-hmm.
I made a post about this today on International Workers'
Girls.
Day. That's right. But no, I mean, without a working class, without a middle class economy, how are things going to really run?
Mm-hmm.
As one CEO of a pillow company, not my pillow guy, not him, no. But as a billionaire, you can only buy one pair of pants, right? There's only so many things you can buy, and then the rest you just hoard the money. Well, what does hoarding do, right? Nothing.
Yeah.
You need to infuse that into the economy. Well, how do you do that? You have to pay more to workers. You got to have better worker benefits. I mean, the list goes on. And how do you do that? You typically got to have a union.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to have a politician that have anti-union viewpoints, then usually the worker is the one that suffers for it.
Yep.
And then in an extension, the middle class suffers for it.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I could not agree with that more. And I think to your point about pants, and I haven't heard that specific example before, but that's a good one, is like, even if they have 10 cars and you have one, they're not spending the same percentage of their income. And it's like, if you're a billionaire, you're probably spending a single-digit % of the money that you have. Where if you are a lower or even middle-class person, if you're a lower-class person living paycheck to paycheck, you're spending 100, 110, 120% of the money that you make. If you're a middle-class person, you're lucky if you're probably spending, 70 or 80% of the money you make and get to put a little bit away. And then you get up to, and all that money is going back into the economy. You spend that money, and then the stuff that you're buying, that creates jobs. People need to make that stuff so you can buy it, right? People need to be there at the store to sell that stuff. People need to ship it. You need a postman to bring it from place to place, from the factory to the store to the person's house. And that's what makes the economy go round. And so that, even if a billionaire spends a few $100 million a year, that's a fraction of their income.
Yep.
If you look at that across an entire economy, they're hoarding all of this wealth, where if we paid workers a little bit more, they're going to spend more of that money, and that lifts everybody up, because that money is then not just sitting in their stock portfolio. It is circulating around with real goods that real people need to make and sell and buy.
Well, and also longevity of the country.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a family and I can support my kids to go to a trade school, or if I go to a college, further their education, become smarter. I mean,
absolutely.
The more smarter,
the more
smarter the next right.
See what we need, this people. This is the son of a teacher, guys. We need more funding for education.
But the better educated our next generation is, typically the better the country becomes, right? If we just have a bunch of people that aren't educated and don't have that stability as parents to have that income to support the kids, usually, we start a decline in our country.
Yeah. 100%.
Becomes a national, I mean, in a long way roundabout, it becomes a national security risk. If we have a bunch of stupid civilians running around the country, I mean,
we see the results of that,
Yeah.
Hey.
Also, I don't know if Jordan just watched the documentary called Capital right before this episode or not, because he just described the plot of it. Fantastic documentary on the hoarding of capital of our elites and the leading to income inequality and necessarily the socioeconomical effects of capital hoarding.
Yeah. Money only works in a capitalist society if it's being spent. So 100%. Workers' rights, obviously, the best way to do that is to make sure that people have money to spend. And I was just doing some research for another video the other day because some idiot on TikTok whose his handle was like financial physics or something. Why is it always the people who pretend to be an expert on something have no idea what they're talking about? And he's like, the reason that wages haven't gone up is because companies just can't afford to pay you. And I'm like, corporate profits after taxes have gone up 600% since the year 2000.
Yep.
Average wage has doubled, has gone up 100%,
Yep.
6 times more. So they could, in theory, be paying us 6 times more and be making the same amount of money.
Yep.
So, it's
Classic. Love it.
So obviously we have less money to spend versus money that is out there in the economy that's being made, and that is hurting us. I agree. I think that is what everybody should be considering when they go to the ballot box. But anything post office related you want people to keep in mind?
Like I just said, not one politician has the power to out DeJoy. But a group of politicians can certainly put on a pressure to encourage to get him out. Get your ballot in early. As soon as it gets delivered.
Right.
Do your research on your particular candidate that you want to vote for, and then send it in. Give us an opportunity to serve you, and don't blame us for your tardiness. Don't sit on your on your ballot for 3 weeks and then wonder. It's wide known that our service is slow right now.
Yeah.
So once you get your ballot, vote how you want to vote, and then get it in.
Right. Would you? So, like, if you had somebody who had a mail-in ballot, at their house, would you recommend, like, if they're getting really kind of close to the crunch time, would you recommend they actually bring it into a post office or drop it off at a pickup box rather than wait, for their?
So,
carrier to come
unfortunately, whether you leave it at your mailbox for me to pick up, or in a neighborhood blue box, or just drop it off at the station, really doesn't have a big
impact
It
on
feels like it does to me.
Right. I mean, it's
I'm
certainly
taking one of the steps out of the leg to get it where it needs to go, right?
right. No, the whole slow up is the processing. And so once, for example, Minneapolis, from my station, it gets picked up on a CDL and taken to another processing plant. Gets processed down there, depending on where it's being delivered to. It gets sent to another processing plant, and it gets put on another CDL.
Right.
I mean,
right.
so like the dropping off at your local post office really doesn't speed it up.
Sure.
Which amazed me too that you bring that up, because I mail merchandise out on a pretty regular basis. And it's been like, I literally just throw it in my mailbox. You guys pick it up. It's been super easy. And recently I mailed a group of packages out. They're all the same thing out together, like 4 or 5 of them in one thing. And 4 of them got where they were supposed to go, and the other one never got like put into the system at all. And so I'm like, I'm calling, and I'm like, I need to figure this out. Like, where is it? I need to know if I need to send this guy another one, because and obviously this was actually, he ordered it through TikTok, so they were getting pissed at me that it like wasn't delivered because it never showed that it was mailed and all that.
Yeah.
And the people they kept putting me in touch with was the person at my local post office, and then the person at the post office it was supposed to be at that it never got to. And I'm like, I appreciate you guys calling me and trying to figure this out, but like, I mean, maybe my local post office person, if they didn't get it like put in or whatever, but they went through everything and they had a scanner problem, and she's like, yours was the one I scanned for, and then the fifth one wouldn't scan, and I was like, why are they sending me to these people? I feel like somebody at a processing facility is the ones who need to be looking for it, and they warrantied me and everything. It was fine, but it was I felt bad because I'm like, you guys, especially the guy at the receiving end, I'm like, it never got there. What are you doing?
I get that all the time. I've got a couple of businesses on my route that regularly ship out stuff, and I always follow up with them. Hey, are you aware of this tracking, this and that? And I always update them on their infrastructure. Hey, down in Georgia, you know, they're doing SNDCs, they're consolidating, or you know, in this part of the country, they've got a natural storm going on, whatever, just to kind of keep them in the loop. But,
no, it happens. You can't be 100% perfect with as much volume as you handle. I had no ill feelings about it being lost in the mail. It was just it was just nuts that they were like, just the local people. We're not going to send it to the places that it probably is and have anybody look there. They had the local post office people calling me directly, and I was like, it doesn't feel like that should be their job.
That's one thing I wish the post office would do, and if they're going to modernize this way, and do similar tracking to what like UPS and FedEx do. Where, I mean, you know where your package is at all times, and like in your case, I mean, you didn't know where your package was. You know, unless once it gets delivered, you might get a scan to just say it was delivered. But did it? You know, it's notorious for packages to go from Minneapolis to Des Moines, down to Jacksonville, Florida, back up to Minneapolis, I mean, all over the country, right? Which is hilarious that we're a cheap service, and so to keep it cheap, you would need the least amount of hands or things to touch it to keep it cheap. The more things that touch it become more expensive, right? So it's just hilarious that, you know, that's the process.
Yeah. No, it's impressive. I mean, you guys do have logistics figured out better than anybody in the world. I know. Well,
that's why private businesses are coming after us. DeJoy leading the charge, it seems like, because we have a monopoly on door-to-door delivery. You know.
But I mean, like, just the fact that you guys are that good at logistics, because in the past when they've tried to break postal unions, they had was it the National Guard or the military try to take over for it?
So I mean, if you got more time, that's another thing that we didn't kind of cover was our postal strike.
Oh yeah. Let's why not? Sure.
So like moments ago, we discussed post office was tax dollars, right? And then we went on strike back in the 1970 for better conditions, better pay. I mean, we know what strikes are for. And so the carriers started in New York, Vince Sombrado. One of the ways they retaliated was they took the labels off of our case that keeps things in numerical order for us. So then once time came where the National Guard came in to start delivering, they had no idea where the mail went. They had a massive case with hundreds of slots, but no addresses or labels to figure out where the mail goes. Right. So how do you begin to even sequence that?
Yeah, you got to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, literally. And so the NALC actually has a good video on YouTube, the Revolt of the Good Guys, and it's about our strike. All right. And there's one of the pictures of a National Guardsman at a case, just dumbfounded, just like jaw dropping and lettering his, big eyes, like what the hell am I doing here, And it wasn't soon after that. That's when politicians started getting more involved, realizing the seriousness of this, and that the union isn't going to back. It was a wildcat strike. It was not union authorized, by the way, too.
Sure.
So handful of branches, strategic branches. One of them being in Minneapolis went on strike. And then that's how we became the Postal Service rather than the Postal Agency.
Nice.
And now we directly negotiate with the Postal Service rather than Congress.
Yeah.
So
got it.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, we've as always gone over a little bit on our time, but that's common, very common. So we appreciate you coming in and taking time to share. Obviously, this is stuff we talk about a lot, and again, like I said, it feels like less of propaganda when somebody who's involved in the union is saying it than us just talking out of our ass about it.
Yep.
So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody listening, tuning in every week. We do have stuff now.
That's right. Yeah, we have a full Patreon, YouTube membership. So please, if you want to help us out financially, even if it's $1 a month is the lowest subscription. So it's super low entry. We have a $5 membership that would allow you access to some of the interviews that we do. Earlier part of this interview would be a part of that.
Just kind of our banter before and after.
Yeah,
some of the stuff.
we are looking to do at least monthly sort of one-on-one, or not one-on-ones, but Q&As directly
Call-in
live.
type session type
with
thing.
with those type of $5 members. So we think there's hopefully some fun value in that, and we hope to get some participation here shortly. We've got a couple members already, so hoping to see that grow.
Yep. Thank you guys. As always, if you want to support us in other ways, we've got merch, offjourwagon.com. We've got both the Let Them Eat Toast merch and my personal merch on there. Follow our page, Let Them Eat Toast on TikTok and all the other socials. I'm pretty sure we got one on all of those that we do a horrible job of upkeep, but we appreciate you following them anyway.
Yeah.
Follow me, Off Your Wagon, on all of the socials, or normal socials as well. Fuck that Elon shit, though. And and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.
That's right. Thanks, guys.